Okay, obviously last weekend I looked at the Brisbane Broncos' poor start to the 2019 NRL season. Now we're looking at the Penrith Panthers' poor start to the 2019 NRL season. Now, we've played 8 games. Now, games are being played as we speak, as I'm uploading this video, because I'm 12 hours behind Australia, so games will have been played by the time this video is uploaded. But we're looking at the first 8 games. So, they start against the Parramatta Eels and they lose at home 12. They score 12 points, they concede 20. They lose 20 points to 12 at home against Parramatta. Parramatta were gifted the game. Parramatta didn't actually have to play that well because Penrith played that badly. They completely imploded. They bounced back in round 2 against the Newcastle Knights away from home, ironically. So their first win actually comes away from Penrith. They beat the Newcastle Knights, who won their opening game and won quite well against Cronulla, 16 points to 14 away from home. And that is an important win. But they go back home again and they lose 32 points to 2 against the Melbourne Storm, and that is an embarrassing defeat. One of the worst defeats of the season, although West Tigers have had a worse defeat against Parramatta themselves, but they didn't even get a try on the board. At least the West Tigers against Parramatta at Westbank Stadium got a try on the board. This has been an issue for them all season, is some of their try scoring isn't there. The back line with players like Mansour, they should be scoring points. They're not. Cleary and Maloney in the halves. There's a debate whether Maloney's unsettled and wants to leave. Cleary and Maloney have swapped sides. That seems to have improved some of the scoring at least, but not the wins. They were humbled by Melbourne, and Melbourne in recent weeks have started to stutter and drop points and lose games. They bounced back with a narrow 9-8 win over West Tigers at home. That's their first home win. So they've won away, they've now won at home. So it's 2 out of 4 isn't the end of the world. Unfortunately, they haven't kicked on with winning that first home game. They've lost their next 2 away against Gold Coast, 30 points to 24, and Cronulla 24 points to 20. So they're close. They're close. They're within a try in it. They're a try off, but they're not taking that next step and scoring that extra try. So they're losing close games. Where they win a close game, they've gone on to lose 2 close games, well, actually 3 close games in a row. They won a close game against Newcastle. They won a close game against West Tigers, but they've now lost every other close game since then. Now, Gold Coast Titans, that started their little win run of 2 games. That got them their injection of wins. But, they also lost to Cronulla as well. Cronulla have been a bit stop-start this season. However, Cronulla, unlike Penrith, while they're inconsistent, they can bounce back the next week. If they lose a game, they bounce back the next week. Penrith aren't doing that. Then they play the South Sydney Rabbitohs, who are, not even, at this point, they weren't fully fluent. They weren't necessarily playing at their best, but they lost 22 points to 18. So again, another close game at home, and they lose. So you notice a lot of these close games, they're losing at home and they're losing away from home as well. So there's no one home form or away form. Both are equally bad. Their final defeat was against the Canberra Raiders in Wagga Wagga, which was sort of an away game for them, but it was an away game for the Raiders as well. It's one of those games they take on the road, which is classed as a home game for the Raiders, but they were actually convincingly beaten 30 points to 12 by the Raiders at the weekend. So to tot it all up and looking at the scoring, the 2 narrow wins, they narrowly get over the line, and it's not as if it's a high-scoring end-to-end game. It's a bitty, sloppy, poor affair, really, and they just were less sloppy than their opponents. The games they've lost close, they could have won. They could have beaten the Gold Coast Titans. They could have beaten the Cronulla Sharks, and they actually were winning against Cronulla in that game, and they threw that one away. They could have beaten the Rabbitohs as well. So 3 of their 4 recent defeats, they could have won those games. And this is another issue. They're very sloppy. There's no flow pattern to their game. It's just a mess. They're trying these set plays, it's not working. The backline isn't fully clicking, and Maloney and Cleary in the halves, they've swapped them over. It seems to be improving with the scoring rate, but at the same time, they're still not getting over that line. They're still not taking that next step and bouncing back from defeat. Now, looking at the scoring, and this is where it's really telling, they've only scored 113 points, but they've conceded 180, which is the second worst defence equal in the league. Okay, only the Canterbury Bulldogs have a leakier defence when it comes to points for and against, because it works out as a 67 points difference, negative points differential. That is the second worst defence in the league. Only the Bulldogs are worse. Only the Bulldogs are actually worse. They're equal with the Broncos for leaky defence. So that tells you something, or the Titans. They have a very leaky defence, and they're not scoring enough points, which has been an ongoing theme. Because you look at some of the defeats, they're just breaking double figures early on, and they're poor scoring in the first half of the season when Maloney is on the other side of the field. They swap sides from the right to the left. The scoring goes up, but they haven't won any games since that change has been made. So it's a toss-up. Win low-scoring games and be scrappy, but get over the line, or lose high-scoring games. So there's an issue there. When Maloney is on the right-hand side, they're in games and they're winning those tight games. He goes back to his natural side and it doesn't seem to be working. While the scoring on the Penrith side has gone up, the floodgates have opened defensively every time. So, and they've conceded 30 points twice. No, 3 times actually. They've conceded 30 points 3 times this season. That's 92 points they've conceded in 3 games. That's pretty damning stuff. Now, their next 5 games, they've got the West Tigers again for the second time. The West Tigers, when they want to score, they can, and that is away from home. So their away form has been absolutely atrocious. That's going to be a difficult game because the West Tigers, while they're inconsistent, they are much better off in the league standings than Penrith. The Warriors from New Zealand are the only team out of their next 5 games that are equal with them on points, but they've got a better defensive record. Defensively, they are tighter, not by much, mind, but they have a more watertight defence. So and they can score as well. They can score. They've added Cody Nikorima to their lineup, so they've added a bit of talent and creativity there. And we know the Warriors can score. Even in defeat, they can score points. So it's a difficult one. Both sides are on lengthy losing streaks. Someone has to win that game. And that's going to be an interesting game because that's the only team in the table around them that they're facing in their next 5. Then they go away to Parramatta, and we know what Parramatta can do at the Westbank Stadium. They like scoring points for fun. That's going to be a hiding to nothing. That's what I predict. But anything can happen. Then they have to go at home and play the Manly Sea Eagles, who are going very under the radar, but they're on a winning streak. And they're slowly building momentum. And that's, bearing in mind, that's 4 games down the line, and a lot can happen, as I said in the last video, with Brisbane. But if they were to play that game this weekend, I don't think they win. And they finish off this next 5-game stand with a game against the high-flying, almost unstoppable Sydney Roosters. They've already lost the Rabbitohs in a tight game. The Roosters, they don't do tight games. They obliterate the opposition. They're coming up against some really free-flowing attacks here. When the West Tigers want to play and score points, they can. They proved it earlier on in the season. When the Warriors want to score points, they can. Even in defeat, they can score a lot of points. Parramatta, we know what they can do at home. We know what Manly can do. They can keep it tight. And as proven by this board, even though the 2 wins Penrith have are in tight games, the last 4 games have been reasonably tight and they haven't been close. Well, 3 of the last 4 games have been tight and they've lost. They've been so sloppy. They can't close out games when they're ahead and they can't chase leads down when they're behind. So I don't know what happens there. The Sea Eagles will probably keep them at arm's length and just go for the arm wrestle and just complete their sets and be efficient. They've been doing it all season. They've been grinding out those wins, and I don't think Penrith have the tools at the moment with the players' confidence that they need. Plus, they've lost Isaiah Yeo for the season with a shoulder injury, so they've lost a key leader in that forward pack, of experienced forward pack that it is. But Isaiah Yeo is a massive part of that forward pack. He's out for the season. They have to cope with that. And then the Roosters, Jesus Christ. If they always play the Roosters this weekend, they're going to concede 30 to 40 points. If the Melbourne Storm, who tend to score around roughly about 20 points a game, very steady, solid, they don't explode into it. If they can put 32 points past this team, the Roosters are going to have a field day. So they're currently 15th in the NRL with only 4 points out of 16 teams. They're ahead of only the Bulldogs, and that is by virtue of having a less leaky defence. The Bulldogs, if I was to do the Bulldogs, Christ, this is going to be all over the place with the Bulldogs. They've had some heavy defeats. But the Warriors, Titans and Broncos are also on 4 points, and they do play the Warriors in a couple of weeks' time. So there's a quick look at why the Penrith Panthers are struggling. It's to do with Maloney and Cleary in the halves. They've had some injuries, but their backline isn't flowing. So Mansour is not getting the tries that are expected of him, as an example. And the forward pack are losing that contact battle. They're losing the ruck. They're losing the tackle. And they're not being dominant in that tackle. They're being knocked back when they are getting tackled, and they're not knocking back the opposition when they make a tackle. So they're not being a dominant forward pack. Even though they're getting the points now, they've put Maloney on his natural side. Those points are coming, but the defence has become leakier. When he was on his unnatural side, they weren't scoring as many points, but defence, ironically, Melbourne game aside, was actually a much tighter defence. So there's something not quite right with the halves partnership. And also, Ivan Cleary's sides are regularly known for being low try scorers with an average of only 14.125 points a game. And that's points a game average, is around 14 points a game average, but they're conceding nearly 23 points a game average at 22.5 points a game. So they are low scoring side and they're conceding heavily. Unless they can tighten up that defence and increase their point scoring, they're going to have a very long season where the next 5 games, they might win 1, possibly 2 out of those 5 and lose 3. That still leaves them only with 8 points. They should be aiming for the West Tigers and New Zealand Warriors just to get a bit of confidence and to get some wins together because they can climb the table, because their next 3 games after that are looking a very tall order indeed with the teams they've got to play with their records, and especially the Eels and the Roosters, how freely they can score points. Even the Tigers and the Warriors can also score points at will when they're in the mood. So they've got to catch the Tigers cold. They've got to make sure that they don't make those errors. And the Warriors, that's going to be a difficult task as well. But the Warriors are also on a lengthy losing streak. So it's going to be interesting to see those next 2 games. They are the crucial ones to get some confidence. But then they've got to come up against the Eels, the Sea Eagles and the Roosters. And they might get a golden point. They might get a draw against the Sea Eagles if it's a very close game. But the Sea Eagles are building confidence. They're on a lengthy win streak. And the Eels and Roosters can just have fun with them. So there we go. There's a quick look at why the Penrith Panthers are struggling. It's mostly to do with their defence, but their attack is also stuttering. Which side do they play Maloney? Do they play him on the right? Do they play him on the left? Which side do they play Maloney in the halves? Cleary's not really the problem. His goal kicking's been good. His creativity's been good. It's where they play James Maloney. When they play him on his unnatural side, defensively they're better and they actually win games. When they play on his natural side, defensively they get worse, but they do score more points and they haven't won a game since they've made the switch. So it could be to do with the halves, but there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Place your comments below and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.